Welcome back to the show. I'm Michael Kuzilny. Tough times never last on a Wednesday night in Melbourne. We've got Emily Howie on the couch. We were talking about young Tyler Cassidy, who got gunned down by Victoria Police in December 2008. And we're talking about, Emily, are Victoria Police too, gun happy, or do they pull their guns too soon?
Well, as I was saying, we don't take a position in this case as to whether or not these police were too trigger happy.
No.
But what we think this case has shown is real gaps in training, and the police have made some attempts to include new training programs on vulnerable people.
Yes.
But really interestingly, police don't consider children as a category of vulnerable people, which is astounding to me, because apart from anything else, it seems like common sense that young people who are, necessarily immature need protection, particularly in those kinds of situations.
I totally agree. The only thing I noticed is when a child gets interviewed, an independent person must come along. But in other circumstances, you're right, they're being treated like anyone else. I think they should really have, in a situation like that, have a negotiator on standby, and rather than that, how many seconds? 73 seconds. Before the fatal shots were fired. Yeah,
I think so, definitely. And now we have a Charter of Human Rights in Victoria that, amongst other things, protects children's rights.
Yes.
And the obligation that places on the Victoria Police is to make sure that all of its systems, such as training and its policies and protocols, all actually recognise that children are vulnerable and make accommodation for that vulnerability.
Yeah, that's a very good point for us, isn't it? That's the problem with the police force. It's almost turning into a police service now, but I remember years ago when I was in the police force in St Kilda, we went to a violent domestic and a man attacked me with a spear, and he came very close, and under the guidelines I could have shot and killed him. I had my gun out saying, "Please don't shoot." But I turned around and ran. I thought that was probably the best way, but the sergeant said, "Why didn't you shoot and kill him?" But I thought, I felt very uncomfortable with that. And over the years when I was in the force, I saw a lot of people with mental health issues being shot because they were violent, because they were drunk, because they were acting unreasonable and causing a threat to police. But I always thought there could be other options. It's easy to justify why they shot the people, but...
Yeah, there's definitely other options, and perhaps it's worth looking at other professions who deal with people experiencing mental health crisis or dealing with young people in crisis. Professions like social workers and youth workers or teachers who deal with these kinds of tense and volatile situations every day and manage to diffuse those situations. Those people don't carry guns. They do deal with people who are angry and sometimes even armed, and those situations are dealt with, and most of the time really well.
Yeah, I noticed also in St Kilda when there was a lot of Aboriginals in the streets, and there was always conflict there too. They'd get locked up and quite often beaten up in the cells, I remember I spent some time in the Queensland Police Service, and they had an Aboriginal police officer who only did a few weeks training, but they used to have little yellow tags, but they used to come along to all the domestics when Aboriginal people were involved, and it worked a lot better. They're talking one-on-one, and often the situation would be diffused.
I think they sound like really good kind of pilot programs that we could have here. And there are some really good programs that are being piloted at the moment where they're trying to get mental health workers to actually attend with police at these kinds of critical incidents, because we have things like the CAT team, but the CAT team often don't want to attend a situation that's potentially violent. Or we also have the critical incident response team, which is really well trained police who are negotiators, but they're limited resource, and they weren't called in Tyler's situation.
It's hard to get them out, isn't it, at such short notice?
Yeah, well, we had the former Australian of the Year, Professor McGorry, give evidence at Tyler's inquest, and he made really strong calls for particularly young people, adolescent and young people health service to be created that could assist those people and also assist police. And that's because of the particular access issues for young people, and creating a service that people actually feel like they can attend and is appropriate for them, but also because young people have different developmental situations. So he was saying often up until about the age of 25, young people are more prone to be overwhelmed by emotions or anger, and are just less able to control them.
Yeah.
So they're interesting things that really, it's really important that the Victoria Police take into account.
Yes, no, you're quite right there, Emily. Last weekend they had a big blitz, and they locked up a lot of drunks, and I think lots of police went around with brawler vans, and I had quite a few phone calls because a lot of people ring for free advice, but a lot of young people got locked up, and they were stuck in their cells, 20 to 30 people in a cell, and the young people got beaten up by some of the other inmates in the cell, and that's a pretty horrific experience too, isn't it, being locked up? Some say they only had a few beers, but you know, if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's something that needs to be changed as well, isn't it? Rather than if you think someone's drunk and they say the wrong thing to the police officer, they just lock you up for 4 hours.
Yeah, well, I mean, what we've seen, particularly with the election year last year, was just more and more laws and policies about increasing numbers of police and increasing police powers. And in fact, last year, the Victorian government passed 2 laws that they admitted in the material that went with the laws was an unreasonable and disproportionate infringement on people's rights.
Yes.
And these were laws that allowed police to search people on the street without having any reasonable suspicion that they'd done anything wrong.
Yeah.
I think as a community we really need to be watching these kinds of actions by the government and considering whether or not increasing police powers is really the best response to what they say are unsafe streets or
yes,
alcohol-fueled violence or that kind of thing.
So a lot of people become victims because of a few troublemakers out there.
I think so, and I'm not wanting to cast aspersions at all police members. I know there's really great people in the force, but when people are given those kind of powers and those kind of discretions, we know from experience here and overseas that those kind of discretions to move people on or to search them are used disproportionately against young people, Aboriginal people, homeless people, people who look different and act different, people with mental illness.
We might talk about those differences shortly. We'll be back very shortly on Tough Times. Don't go away.